All right, today we're going to dive into the apartment market in Allentown and the greater Lehigh Valley. Now, from the outside, it might look like business as usual, the same competitive market it's been for years. But underneath the surface, there's a really quiet but powerful shift taking place, and we're going to break down exactly what that means for everyone involved. So let's kick things off with a big question. If you're a renter, you've probably seen all the headlines about soaring rents and how tough it is out there. But does that really match what's happening on the ground right now? We're going to look at why the market is actually starting to soften in ways that, well, just haven't made the news yet. And hey, to be fair, it's easy to see why that red-hot market story has stuck around. For years, finding an apartment in Allentown was basically a competitive sport. You know the drill. You had to be fast, your options were limited, and it really felt like rents only moved in one direction straight up. Right? So to really get a handle on where we are now, we have to remember what it was just like. Let's just quickly recap what created that feeling of a market that was under constant, relentless pressure. It was this self-reinforcing cycle, right? You had a growing population, which led to historically low availability of apartments. That scarcity then fueled really strong rent hikes, which in turn created this intense feeling of urgency for anybody looking for a place. It was a loop that just kept tightening the screws on everyone. The best analogy I can think of is a game of musical chairs. The music was playing and everybody was scrambling for a place to sit, but there just weren't enough chairs for all the people in the game. It was a really stressful, competitive time to be a renter. But just when that game was at its most intense, something started to change. And it's the single biggest thing reshaping the market today, a massive wave of new construction. And folks, this is the real game changer. And I'm not just talking about one or two buildings popping up here and there. No way. We're talking about a significant sustained wave of new development all across the Lehigh Valley. New modern apartment buildings are coming online at a pace this region just hasn't seen in a very, very long time. So let's go back to our musical chairs idea. What happens when someone starts adding a whole bunch of new chairs to the game while the music is still playing? Well, the mad dash slows down. That sense of panic starts to fade, and that is a perfect picture of what's happening in the market right now. And that brings us to what I call the crossover moment. It's that critical turning point where the whole dynamic of the market starts to shift, and it all comes down to the relationship between these new apartments being built and the number of people who are actually looking to rent them. Okay, I want you to picture a simple chart in your head, just two lines on it. One line is renter demand. Think of it as the number of new families or individuals looking for an apartment each year. The other line is new apartment supply, the number of new units that are actually finished and ready to move into. For the better part of a decade, that demand line was way, way above the supply line. The population was growing steadily, but new construction, it was basically flat. Then a few years ago, that supply line started to creep up, and then it started climbing steeply. And just very recently, it has surged upwards to finally meet and even cross over that demand line. That crossover, that's the moment we're in right now. So this is really important. This is not a market crash. Let me be clear. It's a market rebalancing. All that pent-up demand from years of not enough housing is finally being met. And because of that, rent growth is naturally slowing down, and the number of empty apartments is starting to tick up from those rock-bottom lows. It's actually a sign of a much healthier, more balanced market. Okay, so more supply is key. We get that. But if you drive around Allentown, you'll probably notice what kind of supply is being built. It's often new high-end luxury-style buildings. And that leads to a really common and totally fair question. How does that help the average person? This is one of the biggest myths in the rental market. You hear this all the time, right? The assumption is that these shiny new buildings, they only help a small group of high-income renters and do absolutely nothing for everybody else. But that's just not the full picture. Let's break down how this actually works. So here's how it really plays out, and it's kind of like a domino effect. First, the new luxury buildings attract renters who can afford them, maybe from some slightly older mid-tier apartments. Then step two, those mid-priced units that they moved out of are now available. And this creates a chain reaction that ripples down, increasing availability across the entire market and easing competition at every price point. It's a cascade effect that helps way more people than just the first person to move into that new building. So we've established the market is rebalancing, the dynamics are shifting, but what does that actually mean for you? Whether you're a renter, a landlord, or an investor, let's break down the real-world impact of this new reality. Okay, if you're a renter, this is good news. It means you can actually build a short list of apartments instead of just grabbing the first one you find. You have more choices, which dials down that sense of urgency and might even give you a bit more negotiating power. Now, for landlords, the game has changed. The focus has to shift from just filling empty units to really working to keep good tenants. And for investors, it's really time to adjust expectations. The days of rapid automatic rent growth are stabilizing. The market is just getting back to a more normal, sustainable pace. If you take away just one thing from all of this, it's this. In today's market, patience is rewarded. Unlike a few years ago when you had to jump on the first decent apartment you saw, today you can actually afford to shop around, compare your options, and make a decision you feel good about. That power dynamic has subtly but significantly shifted. Look, at the end of the day, this isn't about winners and losers. The Allentown market isn't collapsing, it's just normalizing. In this new environment, the advantage goes to the people who understand these subtle shifts happening just beneath the headlines and adjust their strategy accordingly. The real question is, now that you know, how will you navigate it? Thanks for tuning in.